Without investigative journalism, it is difficult to determine where we would be, what we would know, what historical events would be unknown, whose lives would have been forgotten. If it was not for the work of these brave investigative journalists, we would be living in ignorance. We would have corrupt politicians, social inequality, a lack of accountability, a misunderstanding of our world. It are these investigative journalists who aim to keep the public safe and to contribute to much of the knowledge we now hold. It is difficult to recognize the exact event in which sparked the beginning of investigative journalism, for it is arguable that all journalism is investigative.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Tonight's special features the coming buyer's market in automobiles.
However, most view the writer known as Nellie Bly as the first investigative journalist, a title she earned with her book 10 Days in a Madhouse. Going undercover, Bly investigated the conditions of a specific insane asylum in New York, known as Blackwell Island Asylum. It was here where she witnessed and experienced numerous scenes of abuse. Upon leaving the asylum with the assistance of her friends and family, Bly began to write her experiences in the newspaper, The New York World. Writing her account, Bly reflects that it is only after one is in trouble that one realizes how little sympathy and kindness there are in the world. Thus, Bly began a crusade to help these ones in trouble. She investigated the lives of baby waifs, the treatment of domestic servants, and the hardships of the urban poor. Bly truly aimed to represent the country as a whole. Despite such achievements made by Bly, investigative journalism did not gain popularity until America entered its progressive era.
Investigative journalism, sort of as we know it, probably dates back to the late 1800s, early 1900s, with what is generally called, muckrakers, and these essentially were journalists. They often worked for magazines, obviously always print magazines and newspapers, in which they studied these huge social issues.
Such muckrakers who aimed to solve societal issues was that of Ida Tarbell and Lincoln Steffens. First recognized in the popular muckraking magazine, McClure's Magazine, Ida Tarbell completed a series of exposés on the Standard Oil Company, which was owned by John D. Rockefeller. Tarbell emphasized the economic devastation forced upon families due to Rockefeller's monopolistic practices and his use of vertical integration. Just 2 years after Tarbell's work, Shame of the Cities by Lincoln Steffens appeared. With this book, comprised in a series of articles, Steffens aimed to expose the political corruption within city governments. It was ultimately the work of Steffens that motivated cities to organize positions for city commissions and city managers, thus distributing political power. Although covering such contrasting spheres as political order, economic disorder, and social hierarchy, Bly, Tarbell, and Steffens all followed a direct process that assisted them in their historical discoveries.
I think a lot of journalists will tell you that all reporting is investigative reporting, that there is always the effort to be objective, gathering all facts, and reporting those facts in an interesting and compelling way. Investigative journalism employs a sort of series of methodologies. It's sort of a craft that may take years to master. Investigative journalism is something that often takes more time to develop, to research stories, to essentially become an expert in a particular matter or subject, develop the sources that you need, the primary sources, to help inform your story, and then to report it.
This process can at times be incredibly painstaking. For in investigative journalism, reporters often are conducting interviews with subjects who aim to keep certain information out of public eye. Therefore, these reporters are frequently lied to or led to misinterpret information. Thus, it is extremely important for an investigative reporter to check the accuracy of their interviewee statements. If failing to do so, they run the risk of damaging their credibility. Luckily, credibility is easy to maintain when taking the correct precautions.
One of the things that we're pretty strict about is we don't allow any anonymous sources, so you can't come to us and raise an allegation and expect that to be where anything ends. So we do as much as we can to verify information through public documents.
By searching for information within public archives, libraries, internet forums, courts, or just by simply rechecking certain information with the subject, investigative journalists can avoid major content errors within their work.
A lot of good journalism takes a lot of good sourcing. You get to know people, you get to know who they are, you build a rapport with them, you build up trust until they get to the point where they can say, yeah, this is what happened. It might not be everything that we're releasing right now, but let's work together and see how we can make sure this information gets out there in the right way possible.
Prior to the maintenance of credibility comes the actual development of the story. In hindsight, investigative journalists are incredibly similar to crime investigators. They have to make connections. They have to analyze details that are unseen by the common eye.
I often like to think of the analogy or think of investigative reporting like putting together a 500-piece puzzle. The first part of it is gathering all of the puzzle pieces and laying them out before you. And that's sort of the research, the information gathering or collecting process. You lay out all of those pieces. Some pieces you understand where, how they fit together. Other pieces, it's a matter of trying and testing.
In general terms, investigative reporters perform the same essential functions as their predecessors. However, in the modern age, the method in which they deliver this message differs. For in today's world, journalism has a large dependency on technology, and with increased accessibility to such technologies as cell phones, video cameras, and the computer, numerous consequences have surfaced.
It's gotten so that we have to work faster. There's more involved than there used to be. Big thing now is that all of us seem to be developing into these real diverse journalists where we have to know how to take pictures, process pictures well, not only for the web but for print, and we're starting to venture in where we have to do more video work.
In fact, investigative news is being published and distributed among the public at a rate higher than ever before. This increase in pace is not solely due to easy access to information, but also due to the constant ability to communicate with others.
Most of the good stories really are ones that kind of come across your desk or come through a weird email or a phone call. I can't tell you how many phone calls I get from people saying, you have to check this out. And sometimes they pan out, sometimes they don't, but it never hurts to call a source.
With the assistance of ever-growing technology, investigative journalists have been able to reveal numerous acts of corruption within our nation. Most infamous was that of the work done by Bob Woodward and Carl Bernstein of the Washington Post.
As the years went on, investigative reporting began to turn its attention to matters of civil liberties and civil rights. And probably more recently, you can think back to the Watergate days when reporters like Bob Woodward and Carl Bernstein began to focus on accountability in government.
In the midst of the 70s, America was facing numerous issues. We were fighting a war we did not want to fight. Aggravation continued to grow among groups of feminists, and racism continued to exist as a prominent issue. However, in all this turmoil, in all of this division, each and every citizen had one certain individual as their leader, Richard Nixon. With Nixon accomplishing such tasks as the establishment of the Environmental Protection Agency and the signing off of the Anti-Ballistic Missile Treaty, Nixon earned himself the reputation as an effective and trustworthy leader. He was able to keep this pristine reputation throughout much of his presidential term. That is, until 1974, when his involvement in the event known as the Watergate scandal was broadcasted throughout the nation.
Mr. Nixon made these points. He admits that overzealous workers in his own re-election committee may have been involved in the Watergate bugging caper.
First appearing in the Washington Post by Woodward and Bernstein, suspicion rose when it was discovered that the burglars had a connection to the committee to re-elect the president. This suspicion was later proved when Nixon released his tapes. Thus ending his position as the President of the United States. In more recent news, merely 4 years ago, our nation was screaming in outrage over one particular discovery. First published within The Guardian, it was revealed that the National Security Agency was massively invading the privacy of millions of Americans. It was shown that the NSA was looking at billions to trillions of data on a daily basis. They were monitoring phone calls, internet usage, and text messages of citizens throughout the nation. Thus, the public entered a mode of paranoia. Many came to believe that someone in a government office hundreds of miles away were watching their every move. Despite being exposed of their inside activities, the NSA continues to monitor citizens of America, believing that their actions are ensuring the safety of the general public. Although not always yielding massive results, investigative journalists all succeed at making citizens aware and holding all those at fault accountable.
I think that without good investigative journalists, we really wouldn't know a lot. I think a lot of big agencies, whether that be government, whether that be corporate, whether that be whatever you want to name, don't always want to give out the whole truth. And everyone has their own reasons for believing that. I think we as people sometimes don't always want to give out all that information. But I think if we don't live in a society where we have strong investigative journalists asking questions, holding people accountable, we're really in for a difficult time.